The night the ravens screamed, Amleth was still a child. He ran through the torchlit halls of his father's hall, the smell of smoke and sweat heavy in the air, his bare feet slapping against cold stone. King Orvindil Warraven had returned from battle broken in body but alive, his crown still his. The warriors drank and shouted, celebrating survival more than victory. Amleth watched from the shadows, his heart full of awe and fear. His father was a giant to him, a scarred warrior king whose voice could still silence a room. That night, Orvindil summoned his son. He led Amleth beneath the hall, down into the earth, into a hidden chamber lit by fire. There, amid bones and ancient symbols, the king removed his crown and spoke not as a ruler but as a father. He told Amleth that one day he would die. That the crown would pass to him. That a king must be strong, merciless, and ready to spill blood to protect his name. Orvindil placed a sword in Amleth's small hands and made him swear an oath. Protect your mother. Avenge your father. Kill Fjolnir. Amleth repeated the words, not fully understanding them, but feeling their weight settle into his bones. Above them, fate was already moving. Fjolnir, Orvindil's brother, watched the celebration with a smile that never reached his eyes. He had fought beside Orvindil, bled for him, lived in his shadow. Now the king was weak, wounded, limping. Fjolnir saw his moment. Power was never given. It was taken. When the betrayal came, it came like a blade in the dark. Amleth heard the screams first. Then the clash of steel. He ran again, panic burning through him. He reached the hall just in time to see his father dragged into the night, Fjolnir's men surrounding him like wolves. Queen Gudrun stood beside Fjolnir, her face unreadable. Orvindil fought even then, roaring like a wounded beast, but the numbers were too many. Fjolnir drove his spear into his brother's chest. The king fell, blood soaking into the mud, his eyes finding Amel. The sea became his teacher. After the night he escaped, Amleth drifted from shore to shore, surviving on instinct and violence. Hunger was constant, cold was normal, and fear became a tool instead of a weakness. He learned to read men the way others read weather. Who would kill? Who would break? Who would follow? Every village raid hardened him further, stripping away whatever softness the child in him still carried. He joined war bands not because he believed in their cause, but because war gave him structure. In battle, he felt closest to purpose. The berserkers he ran with lived like animals and died like legends. Before fighting, they howled, beat their shields, bit into their own flesh, and let madness take over. Amleth embraced it fully. When the rage came, he was no longer a boy with a stolen crown. He was a weapon. Years blurred together. Kingdoms rose and fell without meaning. Gods were prayed to and forgotten. Amleth aged into a man marked by scars, his body carved by blades and time. Yet the oath never aged. It stayed sharp, whispering in quiet moments, waiting for the right breath to strike. One winter night, after a raid soaked in blood and smoke, the berserkers encountered a seeress. She lived apart from the world, surrounded by bones and silence. Her presence unsettled even the most brutal men. When she spoke, it felt as if the ground listened. She called Amleth by name. Not the name he used now, but the one his father had spoken in the firelit chamber long ago. She told him his story was unfinished. That the man he hunted had lost his throne and fled west. That his mother still breathed. That his fate lay in ice and fire. The words hit harder than any blow. Amleth knew then that all the years of blood had not been wasted, but they had not been enough. The oath demanded completion. When slavers attacked the berserkers months later, Amleth did not fight back. He let the chains close around his wrists. He let himself be beaten, stripped, reduced to prop. After his mother's death, the world felt thinner, as if the lie that had shaped his life had been burned away, leaving only raw nerve and instinct. Amleth did not mourn in the way other men mourned. There was no space left for tears. Guilt and rage mixed until they were impossible to separate. He had killed for a story that was never true, yet stopping now would mean admitting that every step he had taken since childhood had been meaningless. He refused that. Fjolnir was no longer just the man who murdered his father. He was the last living proof that fate could not be escaped. As long as Fjolnir breathed, Amleth's life could not move forward. The farm erupted into open violence. Slaves fled into the night. Fjolnir armed himself and his remaining men, turning the settlement into a fortress of fear. He suspected everyone. Trust vanished. Every sound in the dark became a threat. Amleth struck whenever he could. He killed Fjolnir's eldest son during a brutal confrontation, the act carried out not in secret but in fury. Blood soaked the earth, and the scream that followed carried across the land. There was no hiding now. The war was no longer in shadows. It stood in the open, naked and unavoidable. Olga begged Amleth to leave. She saw the end approaching long before he did. She spoke of survival, of choosing life over prophecy. She reminded him that they could disappear into the world, that the land was wide and fate was only as strong as the people who obeyed it. For a moment, he listened. They fled together under cover of darkness, leaving the burning farm behind them. The sea carried them away, and with each mile, Amleth felt the pull of the oath weaken. Olga's presence grounded him. With her, the future felt possible. Not glorious, not sung by poets, but real. Then she told him she carried his child. The words should have brought joy. Instead, they brought terror. Amleth saw himself reflected in that unborn life. A child shaped by vengeance. A boy bound to an oath. The fire faded into silence. Amleth lay between worlds, his body broken, his blood mixing with ash and molten stone. Pain no longer screamed. It hummed, distant and dull, like a memory already losing its shape. He had chased vengeance across a lifetime, and now there was nothing left to chase. In his final moments, time unraveled. He saw himself as a boy again, running through the halls of his father's kingdom, believing the world was simple. Good kings, evil traitors, clear destinies. He saw the oath carved into his soul before he understood what it would cost. That promise had given his life direction, but it had also taken everything else. He understood it now. Fate had not forced his hand. He had chosen it again and again. Each killing, each step forward, had been his own. The gods had not dragged him through blood. He had walked willingly, believing suffering gave meaning to existence. The vision shifted. He saw Olga walking through a forest filled with light, her hand resting on her belly. He saw a child running ahead of her, laughing, unburdened by crowns or curses. That child would never know Amleth's face, but would live free of his shadow. That, at last, felt like victory. Not the victory of conquest. The victory of ending something terrible. As his breath slowed, the Valkyrie lifted him, her wings cutting through smoke and flame. Below them, the land burned and reshaped itself, just as lives did. Amleth felt no fear. The rage that had once defined him was gone, burned away with the lie that started it all. He had been a son, a slave, a killer, a lover, a ghost. He had been what the world made him, and what he allowed himself to become. When the darkness finally closed in, it did not feel like punishment. It felt like rest. The saga of Amleth ended not with a kingdom reclaimed, but with a cycle broken. No songs would tell the full truth. No legend would capture the cost. But somewhere beyond fire and ash, life would continue without vengeance at its center.